Good morning, friends, from our beautiful meditational woods. I'm here with you this Sunday to celebrate Earth Day, and how appropriate to be here out in the woods appreciating God's creation. We welcome you to the service today and hope you join us in worship and in spirit as we continue to connect electronically. There are a few announcements I'd like to share. We continue to have unprogrammed worship on Monday at 12:15 and Wednesday evening at 6:45 through Zoom. So if you'd like to join, please contact the office at office@indyfriends.org to receive the Zoom link. We also will have meetings for business at the end of our service at 11:30 today. So we invite you to join us by Zoom, which you should have received a link to be able to do that. Let us begin today with prayer, an Earth Day prayer for this special day. Oh dear God, we thank you for this earth, our home, for the wide sky and the blessed sun, for the ocean and streams, for the towering hills and the whispering wind, for the trees and green grass. We thank you for our senses by which we hear the songs of birds and see the splendor of fields of golden wheat, and taste autumn's fruit, and rejoice in the feel of snow, and smell the breath of spring flowers. Grant us a heart opened wide to all this beauty, and save us from being so blind that we pass unseen when even the common thorn bush is aflame with your glory. Amen.
Hey kids, here's a song you should know. This is He's Got the Whole World in His Hands. Sing along with me. He's got the whole world in His hands. 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 How about the itty bitty baby? He's got the itty bitty baby in His hands. He's got the itty bitty baby in His hands. He's got the itty bitty baby in His hands. He's got the whole world in His hands. You and me, brother. He's got a you and me, brother, in His hands. He's got a you and me, brother, in His hands. He's got a you and me, brother, in His hands. He's got the whole world in His hands. You and me, sister. He's got a you and me, sister, in His hands. He's got a you and me, sister, in His hands. He's got a you and me, sister, in His hands. He's got the whole world in His hands. All right, whole world. Got the whole world in His hands. He's got the whole world in His hands. He's got the whole world in His hands. He's got the whole world in His hands.
Our scripture reading today is from Psalms 95, 3 through 7. For the Lord is a great God, and a great King above all gods. In His hands are the depths of the earth. The heights of the mountain are also His. The sea is His, for He made it, and the dry land which His hands have formed. O come, let us worship and bow down. Let us kneel before the Lord our Maker. For He is God, He is our God, and we are His people, of His pasture, and the sheep of His hand.
Happy Earth Sunday to all of you joining us from the comfort of your own homes today. Since this week is the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, I thought it would be most appropriate to record this message from our meditational woods. I so wish you could join me in this beautiful setting to share worship with the birds and the squirrels and amidst the Creator God's handiwork. Maybe sometime this week you can get out of your home, swing by the meeting house, and take a walk in these budding, beautiful woods. Someone who loved taking walks in the woods was John Muir. He was the Scottish-born American naturalist, writer, and advocate of U.S. forest conservation, who is largely responsible for the establishment of the Sequoia National Park and Yosemite National Park. He once wrote this. He said, "God's love is manifest in the landscape as in the face." During this pandemic and isolation, these words have had much deeper meaning to me. With people's faces covered with masks when I'm out taking my socially distanced walks, I found myself focusing more and more on the surrounding landscapes and what is going on in nature. I'm observing more of life bursting forth from the trees as they bud and they bloom, the friendship of the ducks that frolic and play in our ponds, and even the way the sun, as it sets in the evening, changes the ambiance just enough to calm my heart. The fields across from our neighborhood have been blanketed in a beautiful purple clover, which I've not seen bloom since moving to Fishers almost 3 years ago. I even stopped on a recent walk to take notice of the water in a small creek heavily flowing under the bridge on Maryland Road after a recent rainstorm. I never noticed the bridge when driving down Maryland Road, or how picturesque it was from that walking path. Speaking of rainstorms, we've had a couple doozies of a rainstorm since the pandemic began. Even from looking out my window or watching from my front porch or patio, the landscape of the sky has been changing. And during our last major storm, I experienced the sky lit up with lightning and cloud forms like I've never seen before. The deep rolling of thunder and the gusty winds all have had a different feel to me. Just maybe I'm experiencing more of my landscape because I have more time to appreciate and encounter God's handiwork. Or maybe, better yet, I have actually made the time to appreciate and encounter it. I sense, like John Muir, I'm allowing God's love for me to be manifest in the landscapes of my life, just like it does through the faces of friends, neighbors, and relatives. Something sadly I've taken for granted for probably way too long. The pandemic, in a good way, has forced me to see more of God's love for us in the landscapes and nature in general. I no longer take it for granted, but see it as a part of my daily experience, as an important participant in the thing that we call life. Now, obviously this pandemic is affecting us each in different ways. Even as I considered Earth Sunday and what I would share with you today, I found myself thinking how hard it is to celebrate the earth and creation amidst so much sickness and death and pain. Yet I began to see this from a fresh perspective after reading an article from The Atlantic by Marina Koren titled, "Pandemic is Turning the Natural World Upside Down." Sometimes in the midst of life's difficulties and struggles, we find it hard to see the good or the positive effects taking place. In the article, Koren points out some of the good and positive effects taking place in our world, like this: there's less rumbling and movement on the surface of the planet. There's less air pollution. The city soundscapes are changing, and even the oceans and waterways are quieter. Seismologist Paula Kohlmeyer says that it's very literally reflecting a slowdown of our lives. It has changed so much in the last couple of months that seismologist Thomas Lecoq from the Royal Observatory in Belgium said that with the immediate drop in activity, a normal daytime in Brussels resembles actually Christmas Day. Even the observing satellites that are orbiting the Earth have detected a significant decrease in the concentration of a common air pollutant, nitrogen dioxide, which enters the atmosphere through the emission from cars and trucks and buses and power plants. What's crazy is that just this respite in air pollution over 2 months of isolation could save over 4,000 young children and up to 73,000 elderly adults in China alone. Now that's something to consider on this Earth Day. One thing that I've noticed on my socially distanced walks is how much quieter the world is around me. Erica Walker, a public health researcher in Boston, has been taking decibel measurements on her walks through the Boston neighborhoods, and she has found that the noise level has declined significantly. Before the pandemic and during rush hour, her measurements were at 90 decibels. Now they're under 68. All of a sudden, people are hearing the ordinary noises of life again. Silcia Poglioli, an NPR correspondent in Italy, reported that the streets of Rome are so empty, you can actually hear the squeak of rusty door hinges and the chirping of birds. An early sign of spring is almost too loud, she says. Corin in the article points out something we as Quakers have been saying for quite some time and trying hard to help other people understand. Quieter conditions, perhaps for several months, might seem like a good thing. It's well established that noise pollution can negatively affect our health, contributing to stress-related ailments, high blood pressure, sleep disruption, and many other problems. Yet since people have been conditioned for much higher noise levels and have ignored the importance or need of times of silence, or at least quieter conditions, this seems to be causing what some are now labeling pandemic-related stress, PRS. Again, this is where I believe we Quakers have some wisdom to share with our struggling world. Our friend Brent Bill wrote an entire book called Holy Silence. And in it, he states this. He says, "The soul's silence brings us to God, and God to us. Silence takes us beyond the limits of consciousness and into the heart and mind of God." So if you're tracking with me, just maybe the reason that so many people have issues with God or have difficulty connecting with the divine is their perspective. It's possible that we have limited God's ability to communicate with and through us. It seems to be our nature to try and box up God or talk over God and even at times replace God. For some, God has been limited by a holy text or to a set of rules. For some, God has been limited by a specific religious structure. For some, God has been limited by a human relationship. And for some, God has been limited by a particular religious experience. And yet, for some, God has been limited by our busy, noisy, and unperceptive lives. Just maybe during this pandemic and on this Earth Day, we should take a moment to take a deeper look for God's love within and around us. To help us seek the deeper connection this week, I have a couple queries to ponder. One, looking at the landscapes of my life, what have I been missing? And two, as I center down and quiet my life, what life noise do I recognize interrupting my experience of the divine?
Here's a hymn for today. This is For the Beauty of the Earth.
Friends, we are so glad that we had this opportunity to worship together. And I'd like to close our service with a poem by Wendell Berry, The Peace in Wild Things. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and I lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things, who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light for me. I rest in the grace of the world and am free.